Every human deals with tragedy in a different way, but what happens when a 9-year-old girl becomes an orphan and the only way her aunt can reach her is to develop an artificially intelligent android who develops a mind of their own and then becomes a murderous robot against anyone who gets in their way? Today on the show, we're going to be talking about M3GAN, the brand new viral horror movie of 2023. So let's get back, get ready, get some popcorn, and dive in on this episode of Podio Commentary. Hi, everyone. My name is Matt Jarbo. Welcome back to Podio Commentary. Thank you for joining me on this episode. I think episode number 26, as we dive into the most recent horror movie icon to grace the silver screen. And I'm talking about 2023's M3GAN, which just came out in early January of this year. It's definitely a wild movie to look at and to think about, because this is one that kind of hit the scene with its first trailer towards the end of 2022. That blew up, and I'll be talking more about that in the how it's made section. But a lot of people were just instantly drawn to this idea of what was kind of at first described as like a female version of Chucky, but more along the lines of the Brad Dourif version of Chucky rather than the Mark Hamill version of Chucky in that movie that came out a couple years back. But what's really funny about this movie is that it definitely has the makings of a great and grand horror film, but in my mind, it ultimately ends up a little bit on the gutless side because it becomes a little bit too afraid to take the risks that are needed in horror films to really kind of drive the social commentary home. And this movie is, don't get me wrong, it's designed to be a take on social commentary. And again, we'll get into that as we get further into the show. But this is one that's going to be kind of a new take on the podcast. One of the things I'm going to be doing is covering newer movies, maybe not instantaneously released films, just kind of waiting for some of the data to come through and to get more like interviews and information to use while discussing the movie, but more recently released films on home video. So for those of you out there who are looking for a more contemporary talking point in regards to Podio Commentary, get more contemporary movies, newer movies, you're going to get that, as well as getting some of the older films. Coming later on this week for Valentine's Day is going to be the episode on the 1980 classic My Bloody Valentine. And I'm recording that one later on today. So you can look forward to that, to get newer movies and older movies and some stuff that's in between as we expand Podio Commentary in 2023, because so far the response has been fantastic. Thank you all so much for your support. If you would like to help continue growing the show, the best way to do that is to like it, to review it on iTunes, as well as share it to your friends. And follow us at Podio Commentary on Twitter or Real Matt Jarbo on Instagram. And then also youtube.com/Podio Commentary. And if you feel so inclined, patreon.com/Matt Jarbo, where you can, if you want, join the tier and get to pick the movie that I cover and even come on the show and discuss it yourself. That's going to be something we're going to do, but I don't want to dwell on that too much. Let's dive in to the synopsis of M3GAN. M3GAN is a marvel of artificial intelligence, a lifelike doll that's programmed to be a child's greatest companion and a parent's greatest ally. Designed by Gemma, a brilliant roboticist, M3GAN can listen, watch, and learn as it plays the role of friend and teacher, playmate, and protector. When Gemma becomes the unexpected caretaker of her 8-year-old niece, she decides to give the girl a M3GAN prototype, a decision that leads to unimaginable consequences. I don't think there's any denying that the concept of the movie is definitely frightening. You know what I mean? Like, the idea of having an AI-controlled robot that's around your kids is one that, can and probably will go wrong in many instances. But as technology advances, especially most recently with the unveiling and the absolute domineering of OpenAI's ChatGPT-3, its conversational language model that they have. In fact, I use ChatGPT to help me research and summarize a lot of data that I pull from. It's definitely a tool, but I could see it probably having some issues if it becomes self-aware, like the movie Her, which if you ever seen that movie that came out just about 10 years ago, it kind of shows the alternate side of what happens when AI can become more self-aware and take on an idea of its own without becoming necessarily murderous. It's just more of a human drama. This is more of a, like I said before, a fantastical Black Mirror episode that probably could have stayed a Black Mirror episode or might have actually been better as a Charlie Brooker written Black Mirror episode rather than what we got here. And that's not to say that it's a bad movie, but I do feel that it does run up against itself in regards to what it showcases, and it does cut itself a little bit too short. However, that's been kind of talked about by the writer, who almost wants us to think that there's going to be something more down the road. But anyway, let's talk about the writer of this movie. The movie was written by Akela Cooper. Cooper is predominantly known for television. She's worked on shows like Grimm. She's worked on a bunch of other projects. Really, though, her main movie to date is Malignant, that was directed by James Wan, that came out during 2021's pandemic, which is a gonzo horror movie, really well liked by a lot of people, but also kind of divided a lot of people as well. Horror tends to do that, and even this movie actually did accomplish that same goal. But the movie itself was directed by a man named Gerard Johnstone. Johnstone is really only known for a 2014 horror comedy film, Housebound, which did receive critical acclaim for its balance of horror and humor. And as the director of this movie, he wanted to bring his unique style to the film, creating a tone that is both frightening and humorous. And I noticed that came up quite a bit in the promotional material for this movie, or some of the interviews for this movie, where that Gerard Johnstone is like trying to make it funny. And I don't know about you, but like there was really nothing in this movie that was really like slapstick funny. There was nothing in this movie that even I would say necessarily fell in the realm of dark comedy outside of that viral dance sequence, which in my mind, and I'll just say it right off the bat because we'll be talking about it later on, but even the dance thing is funny, but in context, it makes almost like no real sense. And the scene itself, you can tell, was a reshoot. And it's just like, it doesn't flow. It's great for marketing. It's great for TikTok. It's great for all of that stuff. But when it comes to this specific movie and the way that it was used in context, I feel like it was a little ham-fisted and didn't really land the messaging that it wanted to, considering the absurdity of it all. But that being said, this movie does have a couple powerhouse producers behind it. That would be James Wan and Jason Blum. And those are the names most people are going to be paying attention to. So let's talk about how M3GAN came to be, how it was made. So the idea for M3GAN came about when James Wan's Atomic Monster Productions were brainstorming ideas and decided on a killer doll concept. Although Wan's 2014 Annabelle, which he didn't direct, he just produced, also featured a killer doll, the idea for M3GAN was different, as it was meant to be a commentary on the dangers of embracing technology too much and relying on it too much. Again, like I said, that's a very interesting Black Mirror style subject. And as a person who has two kids, technology is something that is definitely helpful when you are trying to get them to be distracted for a couple minutes, or you just need a downtime. It's like, here's your tablet, please leave me alone, because parents can get the end of their rope pretty quickly these days too. And again, it's like, that's not always the best thing for the child, and relying on it too much as a babysitter or as a co-parent in some instances. And I know some parents that do that, it can be very problematic. So the concept is there when talking about technology and our reliance on it, especially from a parental perspective. But again, I think parents probably wanted to see something a bit crazier than what we actually got. That's just my take on it, at least. So anyway, Jason Blum, the film's producer, also said that the movie would have Black comedy elements, which is why Gerard Johnstone was chosen as a director. Again, where were the Black comedy elements in the movie? I didn't witness any. It was played relatively straightforward in the cut that we saw, which makes me really wonder if the original script, which was admittedly gorier than what we got in this movie, I wonder if that is where a lot of the Black comedy elements came into play, because the Black comedy would normally play in during either the lead up to violence or in the violence / gore itself. And I didn't see any of that in this movie, outside of maybe the dance scene. But even that was one that was just like, okay, it just didn't really make a lot of sense, to be fair. But again, Johnstone's approach to Housebound is what brought him into the project, because they really felt that that balance of horror and comedy was something that was going to be needed, creating the tone that was both frightening and humorous, and having those sensibilities was absolutely essential for the idea of M3GAN to take hold. And it did. It tried, and I think it accomplished what it set out to do. So the production for the film began in 2018, and it was confirmed to be underway for what was known as a techno horror thriller that was titled M3GAN, produced by Wan and Jason Blum, with Johnstone as a director and Cooper writing the screenplay. Principal photography began in June 2021, taking place in Los Angeles, California, and then they flew all the way over to Auckland, New Zealand, with only a budget of $12 million. So this movie was super low budget. And what they were able to accomplish for $12 million absolutely looks amazing. I think they did a fantastic job, clearly focusing quite a bit of the budget on the prosthetics as well as the animatronics and making them be as good as they could. And of course, the post CG. The Auckland suburbs were actually utilized to give the film a Denver, Colorado type feel, which is funny because I think the movie was based in San Francisco. I mean, the family originally was from Oregon, and so they wanted it to be set in Denver. It ultimately got transferred to San Francisco. These are just things as they come out. You know what I mean? It's always kind of funny to read the behind the scenes stuff and to see stuff as it's presented. And then as you're reading it, go, oh yeah, that was changed for the movie. This was changed for the movie, and things like that. The filming was ultimately completed by mid-August of 2021, so only a 2-month shoot, and this was just before the COVID-19 lockdown happened in New Zealand. The film then underwent reshoots in post-production scenes to secure a PG-13 rating from the MPAA because the original cut was deemed too violent. There is a little bit of extra information with that. It has a lot to do with, at least as the director and the producers have said, while they were shooting the reshoots, they realized that by not showing us the kills, not showing us the violence, somehow that made the movie scarier. Somehow that made the movie creepier, and somehow that was like the best way to convey what they wanted to convey, while also putting the film in the category for like the PG-13. It's kind of weird to me. It's like, I get the idea, but after I saw the movie, I'm just like, I don't really like, no, the pressure washer scene in general. No, I want to see that. Like, what the hell's wrong with you? Anyway, this is where we get into a little bit of the controversy. When the trailer was first released and it had the PG-13 rating, horror fans were disappointed that it wasn't more graphic and violent. Now, I think one of the reasons why is because this trailer dropped and this movie got a lot of attention right around the same time as Terrifier 2. And Terrifier 2 in the horror community absolutely blew up. This movie is like, I love Terrifier 2, but it's like, it's long in the tooth and it's disgusting. But it was like this $250,000 movie that was getting all this praise for being so violent that people were reportedly passing out in theaters. I mean, even Jerry O'Connell was on some morning talk show and he mentioned Terrifier 2 and how people were apparently passing out in theaters, and it made him want to go see it. And so the word of mouth over Art the Clown and his rampages on Halloween, and the fact that it had so much gore that even in my opinion, it jumped the shark a little bit, that still was creating this, you could call it like a cultural phenomenon during that time. So here comes this horror movie that's from James Wan and Jason Blum, two of like the masters of modern day horror who are kind of like leading this new golden age for like studio produced low budget horror. And they made it PG-13. And you're like, what the hell? Right. And a lot of people were like, what the hell? Horror fans were just disappointed. Now, the film's original cut was deemed too violent for the PG-13 rating, but Jason Blum and James Wan suggested that those who were disappointed with the rating should see the film before judging it. And they did say that before the film came out. And I made peace with the PG-13 rating because I kind of figured that if they did shoot an unrated version of the movie, we would eventually see that, right? We would eventually see that. And Akela Cooper has actually hinted that an unrated movie or version of the movie might be coming down the pipeline relatively soon. And even the other day, and I'm kind of getting a bit ahead of myself here, but the other day on Twitter, Jason Blum was all basically asking people to go back to the theater and watch M3GAN again in order to help get it towards $100 million domestic gross. To which case I responded, release the unrated cut and I will. In the meantime, I don't really feel the need to go back to it because the movie was kind of gutless. And I wasn't trying to be disrespectful. I respect the absolute utter hell out of Jason Blum. But those are my opinions on the movie, and I wasn't the only one. My thoughts were actually echoed by a lot of people in response to Blum. And so at this point, I really believe that they have no excuse to not release this copy of the movie in some capacity, because quite frankly, the unrated side of Universal horror movies, or just Universal movies, was actually a big thing back in the day. Universal would release a movie and then have an unrated cut. That was pretty standard back like in the mid 2010 and the mid 2000s for horror movies and stuff. It wasn't just Universal, but it was other people as well. And it just seems to make the most amount of sense. People will pay the money to see it in theaters, but on home video, they want all the crap that the MPAA won't dictate. You know, like they don't want to be told what they can and can't watch on home video because the MPAA wants to get their greedy little paws into everything. By the way, I don't know if you guys already know this about me or not. I hate the MPAA. I truly despise the MPAA. I truly do. That is just so damaging for artistic expression because of won't somebody think of the children. But that's actually basically what happened here is Blum and Wan were like, look, we have this movie. It could probably go and be aimed at teenagers. So let's not cut them out of the equation. And they actually really go on to talk about this. Blum says that some of the scariest movies out there are PG-13. So I don't put too much stock in the belly aching. Wan went on to say that it's about what's most suitable for the film. And he says, even though that M3GAN is a scary movie, teenagers will still enjoy it. Right. Sure, PG-13 horror always has the teenagers go out in droves. I mean, look, there's been cases of that, obviously. You've got like Ring, and there was like, you know, The Grudge and a bunch of those Japanese adaptations that came over here about 20 years ago. And those are kind of hit or miss or whatever. But even Jason Blum had mentioned like Drag Me to Hell, Raimi's PG-13 horror film that came out in 2009. That movie was fine, but it still played it more hardcore than this. You know, like this was aiming to be cut down to PG. Like this could be played on television sort of thing, because it doesn't really, the stuff that was really violent in the movie could easily be trimmed out, could easily be cut down in order to convey the same message, which is fine if you're trying to go for that, you know, Saturday afternoon, free form, made for TV edit version of this movie. But for hardcore horror fans, which, let's be realistic here, are driving a fair amount of the box office outside of superhero films and freaking anime releases. And this is kind of just disrespectful to them. And I'm going to bring up the movie Smile. Smile, $20 million horror film, over $200 million worldwide, off of 20 million, a massive success for Paramount. Walter Hamada, who recently quit as being the head of DC Films, was brought on by Paramount to establish a new horror division to do basically what he did with the Conjuring universe over at New Line, which, by the way, grossed $1 billion. And a lot of that stuff was, you know, I think there was a mix of PG. It was mostly PG-13, but they were able to play it up pretty well. And he's bringing over the guy who brought Smile to Paramount as one of his lieutenants over there. So they understand that horror can be done for cheap. Horror can be done effectively for cheap, but you still have to hit those marks and check those boxes. And that was one of the biggest issues I had with this movie. So what really blew this movie up was when the very first teaser was released on October 11th, 2022. It was set to the Taylor Swift song, Nice to Have a Friend. And it was the clip of M3GAN that was dancing that gained all of the widespread attention because it just seemed so weird. Like when that trailer dropped, I watched it. I was like, all right. And then she does that dance before grabbing the paper cutter blade. And I'm like, oh shit, it's about to get real. Like this is now into some weird, creepy territory. And sadly, that was like the only real scene in the movie like that. But that was enough in order to get TikTok on it, to get YouTube Shorts on it, Instagram Reels on it. It became viral, so much so that it became like the main selling point of the movie. I mean, even Allison Williams had talked about how like they were a little unsure whether or not that should be in the trailer, because they're like, we don't want to give that away. We want that to be like the dark comedy moment, which I guess is like the only funny moment in the movie. But once you've seen the trailer and you look at that in the context of which the trailer was presenting itself, you can go, oh yeah, like it wasn't really funny. It was just meant to be creepy. And it worked effectively for the scene. But, you know, listen, I mean, Allison Williams said they shouldn't have done it, and she's basically admitted that she was wrong. and that Universal's marketing team knew what they were doing, because at the end of the day, their job is to get butts in seats. And that's effectively what they were able to do when the movie came out. So before I dive into the box office and the critical stuff, let me talk a bit about the movie itself and give my overview on it. So the story I thought was interesting. You know, young 9-year-old Cady is with her parents. There's a whole battle in the beginning when she's got that weird pet doll thing. And, you know, she's the parents like screen time is a big conversation. And they're, you know, the vibe I got out of that was that they were kind of like, you know, hippie hover, you know, helicopter parent Oregonian types. And I'm an Oregonian born and raised. So believe me, I know the type of people that they're making fun of here. But having it be like where they die in the car accident very much reminded me of the opening of Disturbia. Like, I know it needed to be a selling point for the movie in order to kind of move us into the key story. But I just felt like the conversation about the screen time side of it was just like a little, all right, they're just kind of establishing that they're not tech heads and that she's going to go live with a tech head and there's going to be that disconnect. But the disconnect that happened after that was not even really about technology so much as it was just like Gemma's inability to console Cady in the way that Cady needed. And Cady was, you know, kind of upset at the technology because they kind of hinted that the technology had an impact on why her parents died, because they were fighting over that specific little doll, you know, weird kind of Furby knockoff that the Funky company had made. Funky was the company that Gemma works for, which is obviously Funko, right? Just with an I at the end instead of an O. Original stuff there, Akela Cooper, truly original. I get it. It feels very Silicon Valley-esque, you know, but I was like, all right, whatever, we're going to roll with it. It's meant to be kind of tongue in cheek, but unfortunately, it didn't really have that vibe. And I know that they brought in Ronnie Chen as a way to kind of sell the comedy, because he's great on The Daily Show. He really is. He's really, really, really funny. And they wanted him to kind of be like the tight ass, you know, boss, but also is kind of played for laughs. I never really got that vibe out of the character. Like, I know that's what they were going for, and I know that's the performance he was trying to give, but I never really felt like that was kind of the case. He was still fine. He was still enjoyable. I still thought he added to the movie, but it just didn't really work in the way that they wanted him to, because it almost felt like there was a relationship between him and Gemma, like that they had a physical, intimate relationship. At one point they were dating, or at one point they've at least like gotten drunk and slept together. Like there was some kind of intimacy there between the two of them that had clearly devolved over time or dissolved over time. And that there was animosity where it's like, she's more interested in her career and she's more focused on the building of stuff. He's now at the head of the company and he has to, you know, worry about stockholders and sales figures and everything like that. And so whatever relationship they had just kind of like, you know, went away, just migrated away from each other. But I feel like there was a relationship there that was more than just friends. I mean, that was like, well, I should say also in regards to like when you write these kind of movies, that's another factor inside of that, right? Where you have to have some kind of romantic relationship, but it wasn't really that with this. The romantic relationship, the relationship was between Gemma and discovering, you know, her motherly side for Cady, because that was the key component of the film. I just felt like there was a subplot with the Ronnie Chen character that was never truly explored. And maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Maybe in an interview they'll confirm or deny. I have no idea. But that's the vibe I got out of that. And then, of course, you know, he's upset at Gemma because Gemma is working on this animatronic doll versus trying to develop the next version of this weird pet thing. And then, you know, Gemma finds out about her sister dying and she's going to be looking after Cady. And so it's, again, that adjustment period. And this is where, you know, we get the introduction of M3GAN, and it's such a great idea. You know, again, like as a parent, I'm like, man, if I had, you know, some help like that. Like, I'll give you guys an example. Like last night, I was about 2:00 in the morning. My 5-year-old couldn't sleep. So she was laying in bed with me and we were talking, and I was like, hey, let me read you a story. Let me show you something cool. So I pulled up my phone and I bring up ChatGPT and I ask it, can you write me a children's bedtime story about a young girl and her father who both like donuts? And it prompted this, like, 4-minute story. And I read it to her and she loved it and she wanted another one. And then we spent time messing around with Midjourney AI, making photos on my phone as a way to kind of calm her down and get her to, go to sleep and stuff. And she did. So it's like having that kind of artificial intelligence and using it effectively as a parent is one thing that Gemma was very much going for. And I think as the audience, again, if you are a parent watching this movie more so than a teenager, which is, again, the core demographic is a teenager, which is kind of weird considering that the main girl is 9 years old. M3GAN is between the ages of 9 and 11, I guess, whatever. That's kind of what they're going for. So there's no teenager in play at all in this movie. So marketing it towards teenagers kind of felt like the wrong thing for me. You market it towards parents because they're the ones that are going to go see this movie, right? Like, you market it towards the parents who are going to start seeing the fears. Teenagers aren't going to understand. I mean, well, I don't want to say that. Teenagers aren't going to like fully relate to the concepts that this movie presents, which is why I find it to be really funny that they made it that way. They aimed it that way. And then of course you get to the kills, right? Because everyone wants to see this doll kill. If you like Chucky, any of like the 7 Child's Play movies that are out there, never mind the Mark Hamill remake from 2019, or even the 2 seasons of the wildly successful Chucky series on Sci-Fi, you want to see what happens when you have a killer doll or a killer robot kill people. And that is where we really get into the bigger things here, right? What you've got is you've got the neighbor, and the neighbor has the dog, and there's all just like the craziness with that. Like, the neighbor is a total, Karen, and doesn't care that that there's a boundary issue. And obviously the dog attacks, M3GAN, which causes the M3GAN to short circuit. And then M3GAN goes and kills the dog. And we don't see M3GAN kill the dog, which is fine. Because when you kill an animal in a movie, you run a risk of losing the audience, right? You can murder parents, you can murder elderly people, you can murder cops, firemen, medics, nurses, any children. It doesn't matter, right? You murder an animal, you run the risk of losing your audience. So we knew it was going to happen because animals always die first. That's just, again, a trope. Animal dies, we don't see it. So then you have the neighbor Celia looking for the dog, clearly puts the blame over on Gemma, which is, it makes all the sense in the world. Goes and gets like a cop involved, and then the cop starts kind of sniffing around, and you're thinking like, oh, this cop is going to sort it out, and this cop is going to his cop is going to get it. But instead, M3GAN then targets Celia and kills Celia by, blasting her with a pressure washer and then turning the pesticide on and then poisoning her to death and then like spraying off her face. They cut away from it. You see a little bit of blood, running on the ground in the water, but that's about it. You don't see the actual kill, and then later on when she's in the building at the climax and she does the dance thing and she pulls out the paper cutter blade and she chases down Ronnie Chen and she stabs him with it as he is trying to get into the elevator to get away. And then, she kills his assistant. And this is where it gets a little bit weird. The assistant thing to me is a little bit crazy because you've got Kurt, right? And Kurt is clearly like, they set him up to be like an inside guy, selling secrets off to somebody else, right? To another company, to a competitor in order to like get a one up to just screw over his boss, who's a jerk, whatever, right? But again, even that doesn't have the balls to kind of see it through. There's a line while he's terrified and M3GAN's about to kill him. She basically kind of like lays it out there. She's like, you were stealing plans. You don't know, maybe you sold them, maybe you didn't, but you felt racked with guilt. And then David found out. So, you killed him to cover it up and then you kill yourself. And it's like, no one's going to know that. No one's going to know that she laid out this entire story to him. No one's going to know that information until they look in Kurt's laptop, which they would probably maybe not do at the end of the movie because they would realize that like M3GAN did it, I guess, or there might be security cameras in a Silicon Valley based tech company that would see M3GAN being the one that is wielding the cutter and going after them. It's just, again, there's so many things that just kind of like skate around the suspension of disbelief that while still fun, kind of like pop up in my brain. But then again, like as a writer, I kind of noticed those things, and that's just me. But then you get to the end of the movie and they're battling in the house. And obviously they'd already kind of set the foreshadowing for the final battle. You have Bruce, Gemma's first robot, that has like the robotic gloves. And as Gemma and M3GAN are fighting each other, here comes Cady, puts on the gloves and then starts battling, M3GAN, and tears her apart and stuff. And I saw this whole thing coming. I saw this ending coming a mile away, and that's perfectly fine. I wasn't a bad thing. What cracked me up though was like the gloves were in like a box on the far side of the room away from the door. And somehow Cady was able to run in, grab the gloves, and then run back to the door without M3GAN noticing her or even Gemma noticing her. Whatever. Again, suspension of disbelief. Point A, point B, let's finish the movie. It's perfectly fine. Worked out well, had an effective enough ending. It felt a little bit like Aliens. Get your hands off of her, you bitch, was kind of what came to my mind during this scene. And I was okay with it, and M3GAN gets torn apart, gets destroyed, and then everything is all hunky dory. But then at the very, very, very end of the movie, we see that it's possible that M3GAN's consciousness has been uploaded to the cloud or something along those lines, opening up the door for a sequel, which we'll talk about again here in a few minutes. So the movie itself, I like it. I think it's fun, but I want to see the unrated version of that. I think horror fans not only want to see it, but I think are, looking at the legacy of the two key producers, like you want to, like, it's almost like you deserve to see it. And I don't want to pull the entitlement card, but what I mean by that is like, these guys have done the darker R-rated movies. It just seems to make the most amount of sense to like that they shot this movie for that. Release it for that, No, it's their prerogative if they want to do it or not, but that's this humble horror fan's take on it, right? But what did the critics say about this movie? The critics actually pretty well liked it. It received generally positive reviews from critics who praised its blend of horror and humor, as well as the performances of the cast, particularly Allison Williams and the girl who played Cady. On the review aggregator site Rotten Tomatoes, the film actually got 94%, based on 292 reviews with an average rating of 7.2 out of 10. The website's critical consensus reads, unapologetically silly and all the more entertaining for it. M3GAN is the rare horror comedy that delivers chuckles as effortlessly as chills. Did we watch the same movie? There's nothing funny in the movie. I don't know, like there's a scene in the movie where like Cady first goes to Gemma's house and she's looking for things to do and she's kind of touching stuff. And Gemma is meant to be this like introvert who's all about her career. She has her collectibles. They're, mint in box. And she's like, don't touch those, like her Funkos or whatever. And then later on, she's kind of like forced to like open one in front of the social worker to prove that she can be a mother. And it's like, is that funny? It's not that I'm even a collector. I have kids and I don't want them touching certain things, but it's like, you can set those boundaries. Like boundaries are okay. And this movie almost like this kind of craps on the boundaries that parents can set with their kids. And I understand the bonding process and the grieving process. She's trying to be there. But again, that was something that I just caught. Like, I'm like, this is okay. You could have handled that a bit differently. I know I sound like super negative on the movie. I'm not meaning it to be. This is just honest commentary on it. Like, it's enjoyable. I would watch it again. But here are things I just have issues with. Again, I don't know where they get this humor thing from. Like, did they just see a different version of the film, or do they all know Akela Cooper, which I'm sure a lot of them do, and she's just told them what the movie actually was going to be about, and that's kind of where it came from. But anyway, over on Metacritic, the movie did get an average score of 72 out of 100 based on only 54 critics, indicating generally favorable reviews. CinemaScore, on the other hand, did rate the film a B overall, which, is about average, probably above average, actually, for a horror movie. The recent M. Night Shyamalan Knock at the Cabin got a C+. You know what I mean? And so horror has that impact on people. Or if they don't get the ending that they want, or they don't get what they want, a B would be something that they would grade it. Now, if I were to be interviewed by CinemaScore, I probably would have said like it would have been more like on the A- level. I think it accomplished what it set out to accomplish, but there's still more that could have been done. A B does feel a little bit on the low side, to be fair. But, critics did also very much talk about the cinematography, the production design, and the special effects, with many describing M3GAN as being both creepy and haunting, which I'll agree. Like, that was definitely the driving force of the movie. That was the key element of the film. And on that front, they definitely nailed what they attempted to do. The scene where she's chasing that teenager down and she's on all fours and everything, that is definitely creepy. And it turns out, actually, I forgot to mention this before, but it turns out that reasoning for doing that has a lot to do with how, like, Boston Dynamics has not really been able to tackle bipedal running, right? Like, they're not able to do it. So they have to bring them on all fours for the quadruped for balance, basically. And so that's why M3GAN gets into that run. But that run is, like, super creepy. To me, that's the creepiest part of the whole damn movie. And even that was in the trailer. So, yeah, still good, but just like, this is a movie where you just watch it without ever watching the previews. I think that's the best way to describe it. So let's talk about his box office. As of February 12th, 2023, the movie has actually grossed $165 million worldwide on the $12 million budget, never mind whatever marketing fees that Universal did. The opening weekend of the movie originally was going to have it be projected at making anywhere between 17 and 20 million. But it went on to do 30.4 million, finishing second place at the box office right behind Avatar: The Way of Water. And then in its second weekend, it only dropped a little bit down to 18.3 million, remaining in second place. And over the course of the next couple weekends, it pulled in another 9.7 million and then 6.4 million. The movie did pretty well at the box office. However, now that it's on PVOD, which is how I saw it, I think it's going to probably clean up pretty well there. I mean, I recall Violent Night also being a Universal movie that just recently came out. That movie ended up being, doing pretty well for its modest budget, I think of $18 million. And after that, it started doing pretty well on home video when it was released on PVOD right before Christmas. And that's kind of Universal's release strategy now. Look at Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, which, by the way, go watch it. Violent Night, M3GAN. This is what they're doing, is they put a movie out, let it do its thing, drop it on home video. And in the case of Puss in Boots, it's continued. It's continued to do very, very well at the box office, which is just awesome because, quite frankly, we need more Shrek. So, I mean, I don't know. Let me know if you're with me on that. If you want more Shrek, let me know. So the movie clearly is going to get a sequel. It did enough to warrant a sequel. And what we know about that is it's now been dated for January 17th, 2025. The movie will once again be written by Akela Cooper, and Gerard Johnstone is currently in talks for the sequel. As for the plot and any other cast members besides Allison Williams and the girl who played Cady coming back in, we have no idea. But I'm assuming it's going to be something that's going to have a bit higher of a budget, and they're probably going to keep it at PG-13 because if it did so well with that, that's just what they're going to do. You know what though? But look, I'm cautiously optimistic about the sequel. I'm cautiously optimistic about the sequel because I want to see how they expand the world. The first one laid the groundwork, right? Is the sequel going to have it to where Kurt did ultimately sell off those secrets to another company, meaning that there's a whole other like factory out there that is making M3GAN bots that M3GAN in the cloud is going to be able to control while she still tracks down Cady? It sounds a little bit like the ending of Wreck-It Ralph 2, but again, horror movie style with a creepy ass, 11-year-old female autonomous robot. That's definitely creepier. Or is it going to be, her making her own version of herself in order to track down Cady and complete her assignment? Who knows? I don't know what they plan on doing. They could make this something that really just expands outward. There's been some chatter, fun, humorous chatter about Chucky going up against M3GAN, as if Chucky would stand a chance against M3GAN. I know that's a little sacrilege to say, but look, as much as I enjoy that voodoo-ridden little doll, he doesn't have anything on an AI that has titanium bones. Just going to put that one out there. But you know what? Hey, a horror mashup is a horror mashup nonetheless. So I'm curious to know your guys' thoughts on this one. What did you think of M3GAN? Good, bad, or the other? Let me know. If you are listening to this on youtube.com/Podio commentary, please leave a like and leave a comment, and definitely subscribe to the channel. If you're listening to this anywhere you get your podcasts, subscribe, share it with your friends. Let me know on Twitter or on Instagram how you guys feel about the show and what you guys want to see for the future. And again, if you want to support it, patreon.com/Matt Jarbo. Thank you all so much. I'll see you in a couple days for the next episode where we talk about My Bloody Valentine. Have a great week. Watch a couple movies. I'll see you later. Peace out.